The drama between young jock Rasheeda and Mins has reached a breaking point, and what follows will leave you speechless. Just when everyone thought the tension between the two reality stars couldn't get any worse, young jock made a shocking accusation that is shattering the foundations of their friendship. Fans are shocked to learn that young jock is claiming that Rasheeda is pregnant and that the father isn't her husband but Mendeecees himself. It's because it was just the beginning of what could be the biggest scandal in reality TV history. The night began like any other, with dim lights, laughter, and casual chatter. However, the accusations have set off a chain of events that could cost Jay everything. The police are involved, and Rasheeda's reputation is on the line. What began as a heated argument has now turned into an all-out war, and everyone is wondering how long this explosive drama will last. Rasheeda was there as usual, charming everyone with her usual grace. But something in the air changed the moment she saw Jock's expression. She knew something was wrong. Something was coming that she wasn't prepared for, and then it happened without warning. Jock stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Do you think I'm blind?" he snapped, barely containing the anger. That night, however, everything changed when young Jock entered the room. His face tight with anger, his eyes burning with an accusation that no one saw coming. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shaking despite her attempts to remain composed. "I know what's been going on," he said with rage. Rasheeda froze, her eyes darting around the room, searching for something to anchor her in that moment. This time, however, she wasn't caught off guard. Instead, the jock pointed at her with his finger, accusing her even more sharply. Rasheeda's heart raced, her mind spinning with disbelief. How could Jock say something like that? How could he even suggest such a thing? She was about to respond, to laugh it off, to defend herself, but Jock wasn't done. "You think I'm a fool, huh? You Mendeecees, see? You think I don't know you? Think I don't know you're pregnant with his child?" she asked. The room fell silent, the air thickened, and everyone in the room was watching and waiting. The tension was palpable. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said at last, her voice strained but steady. "This is a crazy joke. You've lost your mind," but Jock was relentless. "You're pregnant, Rasheeda. You can't hide it anymore. You and Mines have been sneaking. Think I can't see through your little games? The whole world can see it. Everyone can see it." Rasheeda felt her breath catch in her throat as the accusations were like a knife slicing through everything she had worked for, everything she had built. The room seemed to spin around her, the faces of those watching her blurred. And for a moment, she couldn't even think straight. She had been with Kirk for years, and although there had been ups and downs, Mendeecees was a line she never imagined crossing. However, Jock's words continued to reverberate in her mind, his voice cutting through the confusion. "Don't act like I'm stupid. I know what I saw, I know what's going on, and you can't. Your insane joke," she finally yelled, her voice rising with the intensity of her emotion. "How dare you say that about me? How dare you make these accusations without any proof? You think you can just throw my life away because of your jealousy and jealousy?" She opened her mouth to defend herself and explain that was all a misunderstanding and that Jock was mistaken. But before she could say anything, something inside of her snapped. The eyes of the insecurities joke flashed with something dark and dangerous. "You think I'm jealous? But it's about the truth, Rasheeda. You've been lying to everyone, and now is the time for everyone to know the truth. You can no longer hide behind your fame and your idyllic little world." Rasheeda's hands shook with a mixture of fear and rage, and her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe this was happening this way. She had spent years in the spotlight, establishing a career, a family, and a reputation, and now it isn't. "True, you're wrong," but Jock was beyond listening. His face twisted with anger, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like he was ready to explode. "I'm not wrong, Rasheeda. The world is about to find out what you've been hiding, and when they do, don't come crying to me the way you're supposed to." For one moment, everything was being torn apart by someone she thought of as a friend, someone who was supposed to have her back. Rasheeda stood frozen in place, her mind racing, her emotions in turmoil, unable to believe what had just happened. She couldn't believe the words Joke had thrown at her, the accusations that now hung in the air like a dark cloud. And as the room slowly started to fill with whispers and murmurs, she turned to her closest friends, her voice shaking. "I can't believe he," before Joke turned and stormed out of the room, leaving a trail of shock and disbelief in his wake. The next few hours were a blur. Rasheeda tried to contact Mendeecees, but he wasn't picking up his phone. And she tried to call Kirk, but he wasn't available either. It felt like everyone had abandoned her, and she was left alone in a sea of silence. She said, "I can't believe he would accuse me of something like that." But nobody knew what to say because everyone was still processing the shock of what had just happened. They all knew young Jock could be impulsive, but was something else. Rasheeda knew deep down that young Jock's words were going to destroy everything she had worked for. But she didn't realize that this was just the beginning. The fallout from this night was going to ripple through her life in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. And soon the entire world would know the truth. The only thing she could do was sit in the silence of mind and try to process the shock, anger and hurt that were now consuming her. It felt like her entire world was collapsing, and there was nothing she could do about it. She tried calling Mendeecees again, but his phone went straight to voicemail. And the unanswered calls were only adding to the confusion and dread. What did he think? Did he believe Joke's accusations? The weight of disbelief sank deeper and deeper into her chest. It wasn't just the claim of infidelity that stung, though, because that alone was enough to send anyone reeling. She spent hours pacing her living room and staring out the window, watching the world go on without her. How could Jock do this? How could he so easily destroy everything they had built? He knew her. They had been through too much together, and they had shared too many late-night conversations and laughs for him to just turn on her like this. Raised as she tried to piece together what had gone wrong, everything had been fine. At least she thought it was. They had always been close friends, and she could rely on each other. But this was beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The hardest part was not knowing where her husband stood in all of this. He had not called her since the night of the incident, and it felt like he had disappeared into thin air. The silence was deafening. Was he out there listening to the rumors? Was he buying into what Jock had said? She closed her eyes, trying to calm the storm inside of her, but all she could think about was the chaos Jock had unleashed. Her phone buzzed, and for a moment, her heart skipped a beat. It was a message from an unknown number, and she opened it in the hopes that it was from Mendeecees. However, as the message loaded, she was horrified to see that it wasn't Mendeecees, but rather a blurry video of her from that night's argument with the Joke playing on screen. The video was already going viral. And although it was a low-quality clip barely a minute long, it was enough to cause serious harm because she could see the abrasive words and anger that had been in the air. The video ended before Jock's last words, but it was obvious what had happened. The world now had a front row seat to the most embarrassing moment of her life. Her private life was no longer under her control. It was publicly available for everyone to view, analyze, and judge. She sat down on the couch, her hands shaking, and watched the video again, wondering how they could have done this to her. She knew how the media operated and how people were fueled by scandal. But this was different. This was her life. Family. Her dignity. The video was all over, and now the comments were pouring in. Some were supporting her, but the majority were condemning her. The accusations and assumptions ranged from "she's lying" to "she must be hiding something" to "she looks guilty" and more. Every single comment felt like a kick to the gut, and the pain was unbearable. But it was only the beginning as the hours passed and Rasheeda was unable to avoid the never-ending barrage of notifications from both fans and followers. Her phone seemed to buzz nonstop, each alert a reminder that her life was no longer hers. The guilt began to set in, creeping in like a dark cloud. The accusations, though completely unfounded, felt like they were chipping away at the very core of who she was. Was there any truth to Jock's words? Was there any truth to the video that was now being shared? The doubt began to gnaw at her. Could Mendeecees have done something to make Joe believe the rumors? Had she misjudged their relationship? The questions were endless, and the answers elusive. Rasheeda couldn't stay locked in, with a heavy heart and a confused mind. She grabbed her purse and headed to the one place she hoped would provide some clarity: Mendeecees' house. As she drove, her mind kept replaying the events of the previous few days, and she couldn't get rid of the feeling of betrayal that had settled deep in her chest. Why had Jock done this? Was it just an outburst, or was there more to his words? The thought of Mendeecees when she got to his house, she took a deep breath before knocking on the door. Not knowing what to expect, but knowing that she couldn't do it alone. Involvement, even if it was just speculation, was tearing her apart. And now the thought that their friendship could have led to this betrayal felt like a weight on her shoulders. When the door opened, she saw him standing there, looking just as confused and hurt as she did. His voice was low and hesitant, and she joked, "I don't know how to reach you. I need answers." Mendeecees moved aside to let her into the house, and his eyes were filled with sadness, as though he was also having trouble understanding the chaos that had broken out around them. "I know," he said quietly. "I've seen the video, and I don't know what to say." Rasheeda's heart fell because his admission that he had seen the video only served to highlight how quickly things had gotten out of hand. But as she heard him speak, she realized something she hadn't thought of before. "Did you say anything to him that would make—" "I don't know why he's saying these things. And I don't know what his game is," he said, interrupting, shaking his head. For a brief period, Rasheeda was unable to speak, her thoughts still racing, but something Mendeecees said made her feel a bit more at ease. "Then what now? How do we fix this? How can I stop it?" she questioned, her voice just above a whisper. Mindy took a step forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We begin by ensuring that the truth is revealed, because we cannot allow this lie to continue." However, even as he was saying it, Rasheeda knew that the truth might not be enough, because once something like this was out in the world, it was nearly impossible to undo the damage. All she could do was try to navigate the storm to prevent herself and her family from being torn apart by the fallout. She knew deep down that was just the beginning, and that the real battle was just beginning. The following few days felt like a waking nightmare for Rasheeda. As the shock of young Jocks everywhere she went, people stared at her with judgmental eyes. And even her closest friends appeared aloof, unsure of what to say or what to believe. The most agonizing part, though, was Rasheeda's silence. She couldn't understand why he hadn't contacted her. And her mind was racing with confusion, anger, and a deep sense of betrayal, because she had spent years with him building a relationship. The accusations hadn't faded, and now every time she opened her phone, the world was there to remind her of the scandal. The video, the comments, the whispers, and the whispers. Life together. But after all of this, she felt as though she was left to fend for herself alone. The silence was more deafening than any accusation Jock could have made if he had thought Joke was the end of everything they had created. She decided to confront him because she couldn't just sit in the dark any longer. She needed to hear it from him. She needed to know where they stood and whether their marriage could withstand the storm that Jock had started. The air felt heavy as she drove to their house, the weight of what was approaching pressing down on her chest. She parked outside and stared at the house that used to feel like a haven, a place where she could always find peace. But now the sight of it made her stomach turn. She took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. Kirk answered after a short while, his face showing a mix of exhaustion and something she couldn't quite place. He wasn't angry, but there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Rasheeda," he said softly, his voice almost distant. "We need to talk," and she nodded as they entered the house and sat down in the living room. The tension was evident, and the silence between them felt like a vast and unyielding ocean. "I don't even know," she said. "Where to begin?" Rasheeda said in a broken voice. "Why haven't you called me? Why haven't you been here for me?" Kirk shifted uneasily, avoiding her gaze. "I've been trying to figure things out," he said, his voice strained. "This is a lot of Jock's accusations." Didn't know what to think. Rasheeda's heart sank. "So you're doubting me after everything we've been through?" Expression hurt. "I'm not sure what to believe you and Mendeecees." But I couldn't help but wonder if there was some truth to what Jock said. The words struck Rasheeda like a slap, and her face hardened as she said, "I'm not accusing you of anything, Rasheeda, but this whole situation is a mess." "I need time to think," she said, her voice growing bitter. "You need time to think about whether or not you trust me?" Kirk didn't. Rasheeda's chest tightened as she fought back the tears. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to face everything together. They were supposed to be a team, but now it felt like they were on opposite sides of an unbridgeable gap. Instead of responding right away, he rubbed his face with his hands as if trying to gather his thoughts. "It's not that simple. There's so much going on, and I can't keep pretending like everything is fine when it feels like everything is falling apart." "I didn't do what he said," she whispered. The Rasheeda stood up suddenly, the raw emotion bubbling up from deep within her. "You want the truth? The truth is that I've been faithful to you. The truth is that I've never looked at men in that way," and the words were barely audible. "I would never hurt you like that. Never, Perk," he said, looking at her, his eyes softening, but the doubt still lingering in his gaze. "I didn't want any of this to happen," Kirk finally said in a strained voice. "I never wanted to doubt you, Rasheeda, but joking," and she turned away, unable to look at him any longer. "The truth is that Jock has ruined everything. He's torn us apart, and you're sitting here questioning me instead of standing by my side." The words hit harder than she expected, and for a moment there was silence between them. The air seemed thick with everything left unsaid. This wasn't just about the accusations. It was about the cracks in the relationship that had existed for longer than she wanted to acknowledge. "I don't know if we can fix this, Kirk," she said quietly, the pain in her voice obvious. "I don't know if I can keep living like this, wondering if you're ever going to believe me again." At first, Kirk remained silent and simply sat there, the tension between them almost palpable. "I don't want to lose you," he said after a long pause, "but I don't know how to move forward from here." The weight of the previous few days finally caught up with her, and she let the tears fall freely without even trying to stop them. "I don't know how to move forward either," she whispered, "but I can't do this alone." Kirk got up and approached her, putting a hand on her shoulder. He said nothing, but the silence between them felt different. Not the silence of doubt, but the silence of two people who persisted even when it seemed like everything was falling apart. As Rasheeda wiped away her tears, she realized that this conversation wasn't the end of their story or their relationship. But it was a turning point when everything changed. The road ahead would be difficult and full of obstacles, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. She took a deep breath and looked up at Kirk. "We'll figure this out together," she said, her voice growing stronger. Kirk nodded, but there was still a ghost of uncertainty in his eyes. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they would try to hold on to what they had left as Rasheeda left the house. The world continued to move at breakneck speed, but Rasheeda felt as though she was trapped in a never-ending cycle of confusion and turmoil. The aftermath of young Jock's accusations had not only affected her relationship with Kirk and Mendeecees, but it had also torn through the very fabric of her life, and the public scrutiny was smothering the whispers. Her mind was still racing with questions, and she had no answers yet. But she was determined not to let them destroy everything she had built. People had questions and opinions everywhere she went. Social media, in the tabloids, at the grocery store, but the one question that kept coming back to her was the one that haunted her every night. How did this happen? Her phone had been ringing nonstop since that night. Some of the messages were encouraging and supportive from friends and fans who believed in her, while others were harsh, accusing her of being a liar and pointing fingers. And her one message in particular stood out. It was from Young Jokes. "I hope you're prepared for the fallout. Asterisk Rasheeda, this is only the beginning." The message made her shudder. How could he be so heartless? How could someone who had been a friend and self-assured turn on her so easily? The words didn't make sense. Joel had always been in her social circle, and now he was publicly attempting to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. She wasn't sure what to make of his words. Was he merely trying to get under her skin, or was there something more sinister at work? Rasheeda needed to know what had motivated him to do this. She needed answers. She had spent the last few days trying to contact him outside of Mendeecees' house, but he had been unavailable and distant like everyone else. She couldn't blame him, though he must have been equally confused and hurt, but she couldn't keep avoiding the conversation any longer. So she rang the doorbell and waited, her hands shaking. A few moments later, the door opened, and there he stood. Looking just as exhausted as she felt, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Rasheeda, Rasheeda." His voice was low and cautious, and he didn't seem surprised to see her. But there was an unspoken tension in the air. Mendeecees said, "Despite the turmoil inside of me, we need to talk." He moved aside to allow her to enter, and they sat down in the living room. The silence between them was thick and uncomfortable, and Rasheeda wasn't sure where to start. She knew they couldn't keep acting like nothing was wrong, so she finally said, "I need to know what's going on." "I don't know, Rasheeda. I really don't. I've been trying to figure that out too, but he's been acting strangely. I've never seen him like this. Why would he say something so crazy? Why would he lie like that?" Mendeecees leaned forward, his face full of frustration. "I don't know, but I do know that there's more going on with him than just you and me. He's been acting strangely for a while now. Perhaps he's jealous, or he's just trying to stir things up. But whatever it is, he's been acting strangely. It's messed up." Rasheeda felt confused and hurt, but what could he possibly be jealous of? Mendeecees repeated himself in a confused tone. "But whatever it is, it's gotten into his head. He's been saying things to people that tried to turn them against you and me, making it seem like there's something going on between us. But you and I both know that's not true." Rasheeda nodded slowly, her mind racing. She knew the truth. She knew that there was nothing between her and Mendeecees. It's just friendship and respect. But Jock wasn't worried about. He was out to destroy her and everything she owned. And now it felt like no matter what she did or said, it was too late. "I don't know how to fix this," Mendeecees said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I've spent my entire life building a brand and a reputation, and now it's all falling apart because of one lie." "We'll figure it out," Mendeecees said. "You're not alone in this. I'm not going anywhere. We'll deal with Jock with everything together." Swiftly went out when her phone buzzed once more. This time, a news alert with a headline screaming across the screen that Young Joke accused Rasheeda of having an affair with Mendeecees. The police were implicated in the investigation, and Rasheeda's heart fell. The situation had just escalated from a minor accusation to a full-fledged public spectacle. How could things get any worse? Men noticed her expression and leaned forward, asking, "What's wrong?" "Look at this," she said as she showed him the news alert. Mendeecees muttered, "This is crazy. We need to stop this before it gets any worse." Rasheeda stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the situation weigh down on her. How had it gotten this far? How had Jock managed to turn her life into a public spectacle? More importantly, what was his endgame? Was he trying to ruin her? Was he trying to ruin everything she had built? Before she could express her thoughts, Mendeecees spoke, getting out of hand. "The police are involved. Now, Jacques has taken it to a whole new level." Rasheeda nodded slowly. "But how do we fight back against a lie that has already gone viral?" Mendeecees said, determination in his voice. We go to the media and tell our side of the story. We don't let Jock dictate how it ends. You deserve better than this. The idea of going public was terrifying, but she knew Mendeecees was right the longer they let the rumors swirl. Rasheeda took a deep breath and decided that if they didn't take action, the lie would become the truth in the eyes of the public. However, even as she spoke, a cold feeling of dread settled in her stomach. She wasn't sure how to respond to someone who was willing to destroy everything for the sake of a lie. And she wasn't how much more she could take, but she knew that she wasn't going down without a fight. The drama is far from over, and as the pieces continue to fall into place, the truth will eventually be revealed. Have started a series of events that no one could have foreseen. Rasheeda's reputation, her family, and everything she has worked for are all at stake, and the battle for the truth is just getting started. As the story progresses, we'd like to hear your thoughts. Will young Jock get away with spreading lies, or will Rasheeda and Mindy's efforts to correct the record be sufficient to stop the damage? Remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any updates on this explosive drawing. We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. How do you think Rasheeda can resolve this issue? What? You do if you were in her position. Stay tuned because this story is far from done. And we'll be providing you with the most recent information as the truth comes to light.